In July of 1924, a group of gold miners working near Mount St. Helens in Washington state reported a terrifying night-long siege by enormous ape-like creatures. The incident at Ape Canyon became front-page news, and the location was permanently named after the attack. The miners described rocks being hurled at their cabin by creatures standing over 7 feet tall. One miner, Fred Beck, later wrote a detailed account of the encounter that remained consistent until his death decades later. Local Native American tribes were unsurprised. They had warned settlers for generations about the wild giants of the mountains. This wasn't folklore to them. It was fact. And Ape Canyon was only the beginning of a pattern that would stretch across the entire Pacific Northwest for the next 100 years. On October 20th, 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin rode on horseback into the remote wilderness of Bluff Creek, California, near the Oregon border. What they captured on 16mm film would become the most analyzed piece of cryptozoological evidence in history. The Patterson-Gimlin film shows a large bipedal creature walking along a creek bed, turning to look directly at the camera before disappearing into the tree line. Despite decades of scrutiny, no one has definitively proven the footage is a hoax. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, a professor of anatomy at Idaho State University, has studied the film extensively and concluded that the creature's locomotion is inconsistent with a human in a suit. The muscle movement, visible beneath the skin, the compliant gait, and the mid-tarsal break in the foot all point to something undocumented by science. Hollywood special effects artists of that era have gone on record saying the suit technology simply did not exist in 1967. In 1976, the FBI received a package containing 15 hair samples and a small piece of skin tissue collected from the Pacific Northwest. The request came from Peter Byrne, director of the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition in the Dalles, Oregon. Byrne asked the FBI to analyze the samples and determine whether they belonged to a known species. The FBI's response took decades to surface. In 2019, through a Freedom of Information Act request, the classified FBI Bigfoot file was finally made public. The analysis concluded the hairs belonged to the deer family, but researchers noted the file raised more questions than it answered. Why was the file classified for over 40 years? Why did the FBI agree to test Bigfoot evidence at all if the creature was merely a myth? The very existence of this file suggests federal agencies took the phenomenon far more seriously than they ever admitted publicly. In 2012, Dr. Melba Ketchum, a veterinary forensic scientist from Texas, published a study claiming to have sequenced Bigfoot DNA. The Ketchum DNA study analyzed over 100 samples collected from across North America, including hair, blood, saliva, and tissue. Her conclusions were explosive. The analysis suggested an unknown hominin species, possibly a hybrid between modern humans and an unidentified primate. The scientific establishment immediately attacked the study. Peer-reviewed journals refused to publish it, forcing Ketchum to purchase her own journal, the De Novo Scientific Journal, to release her findings. Critics called this a fatal blow to her credibility. But supporters pointed out that the raw genetic data was made publicly available and has never been fully debunked. Dr. Ketchum maintained until her final interviews that the scientific community blacklisted her not because her science was flawed, but because her conclusions were unacceptable. David Paulides, a former police detective, has spent over a decade documenting a deeply unsettling pattern. People vanishing without a trace in national forests and parks across the Pacific Northwest. His Missing 411 research has cataloged over 1,600 cases of mysterious disappearances in wilderness areas, many clustering around specific geographic zones. Search dogs lose the scent abruptly. Clothing is found neatly folded far from the victim. Bodies, when recovered, are discovered in locations that experienced search teams had already cleared. Paulides has noted that the U.S. National Park Service does not maintain a comprehensive database of missing persons, and when he filed Freedom of Information Act requests, the agency demanded over $1 million to produce the records. Why would an agency tasked with public safety fight so hard to conceal disappearance data? Paulides has never directly blamed Bigfoot, but the geographic overlap between his disappearance clusters and historic Sasquatch sighting hotspots is impossible to ignore. The Olympic Project, a field research organization based in Washington state, has been conducting long-term surveillance in the forests of the Olympic Peninsula since 2008. Led by researcher Derek Randles, the team has deployed trail cameras, thermal imaging equipment, and audio recording devices across hundreds of square miles of wilderness. In 2013, the Olympic Project captured thermal footage that appeared to show a large bipedal figure moving through dense forest at night. Footage that thermal imaging experts confirmed did not match any known animal. Derek Randles has also collected hair samples, footprint casts, and tree structures that defy conventional explanation. The organization works alongside Dr. Jeff Meldrum and other academics willing to risk their reputations for the pursuit of evidence. What makes the Olympic Project significant is their methodology. They approach the search with the rigor of a scientific field study, not a television spectacle. And their data is quietly accumulating into something that becomes harder to dismiss with every passing year. Consider the full picture. The U.S. Forest Service manages 193 million acres of land, much of it in the Pacific Northwest, yet they have never conducted a formal survey for an undocumented primate species. The Smithsonian Institution has shown zero interest in investigating the thousands of reported sightings, footprint casts, or biological samples collected over decades. The timber industry generates billions of dollars annually from these forests, and the discovery of a new great ape species would trigger immediate Endangered Species Act protections, shutting down logging operations across the region. The financial motive to suppress evidence is staggering. Meanwhile, indigenous peoples across the Pacific Northwest, the Lummi, the Tsails, the Yakima, have maintained unbroken oral traditions about these beings for thousands of years. Science demands extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. But what happens when the institutions responsible for gathering that evidence have every reason not to find it? The forests of the Pacific Northwest have been hiding something for centuries, and powerful institutions may be ensuring it stays hidden. If this investigation opened your eyes, hit that like button so more people can discover what's really out there. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the unknown. Because the next piece of evidence we uncover might be the one that changes everything.